Hey, welcome to Dr. Paul. This is Bridges Live with Dr. Paul, and I'm talking to another one of my great guests. I love to have one on Mondays, and you can always catch me on iHeart and iTunes Radio, and you can always download it and catch it on YouTube. It's on the channel there, and I'm talking with Mr. Kelly R. Little. Kelly, welcome to Bridges Live.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Paul.
You're welcome. So one of the things I like to do, most people know that, is I like to give people the information on how we can make our world just a little bit better. I think, a lot of people look at the sadness of our lives and complain, but we need to turn that around so we can turn things into an action. But along with that, I like to say thank you to all the blessings of people out there who are doing God's work, blessing work, and they're making a difference. And you've been doing this for a while. So, Kelly, tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's go from there.
Say that one more time, Paul. It's here that last part.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there. We'll get right into what you have been doing.
Oh, well. So, a little bit about myself. Did 25 years in the military, multiple deployments, in support of this great country we live in so that we can have many of the opportunities that we have today. Then also on the ground working in the field with black and brown boys, mental health, and really creating opportunities for young people in this country while also working with adults to make sure that we're using a two-pronged strategy to actually best support families and not just an individual.
What part of the branch of service did you serve?
I was actually in the United States Army.
I'm also Army. Hoorah!
Or
so we probably cross paths and chew the same dirt.
Indeed.
So, I know a lot of people like to say thank you for your service, but I always like to say, I volunteered to make a difference. For whatever reason, in all the deployments I've been on, it was something we chose to do, and we learned a lot of things from. So, but I'm going to tell you, thank you for your service, and thank you for coming back home alive and blessed.
Well, and I would like to extend that same thank you to you, and because of the work that you've done in terms of the military, but then turn back around and still giving service by creating a platform for people to share and position themselves so that they can grow in this great country. I applaud you for that.
Hey, brother, and thank you so much, but thank you. We, as God tells us, we need to accept our gifts, but we also need to be ready to be served too. So, and you're continuing to serve, especially our black and brown boys. And I want to talk about that because I'm kind of upset. I'm really pissed off at a lot of black and brown men who aren't doing what they can do or what they have an obligation to do or not putting in the service to do. Kind of like all three. Sometimes I want to snatch a lot of them up and say, put your foot and hand in the dirt and let's get to work, because it's not about what you can't do, because there's something you can do.
I love it. I think that's so critical and so important when we understand that the gifts and talent and opportunities that we've been afforded, some which we may not recognize or even choose to remember, but there are folks who died and who are sitting at the bottom of the ocean so that you and I can be able to connect in this universe, and so that young people can have the same opportunities that other folks have. And so I never take that for granted, because we could be in a position like things that occurred 400 years ago when we wasn't even given the opportunity to read.
I have a lot of some amazing guests on, and you're one of those amazing guests. But in my conversations, either for the show and Bridges Live, or just out in the street when I'm talking to anyone and everyone, just saying, And I do ask the question, what are you doing today to help our civilization? Sometimes people look at me like, who the hell are you, man? And I'm like, hey, I'm just a regular person, but we got to do this together. And a lot of people will partake in the conversation, and some will be thrown off by the conversation. Why do you think that is?
I personally think that's because people understand that sometimes they're not living up to what they should be living up to. And so it's an internal thing that we deal with. So we know that when our values are not aligned with the actions that we're taking, then there's a disconnect. And that disconnect shows up very differently for different people. All emotions are good emotions. It's just how we choose to react to those emotions. And sometimes anger comes out when it really shouldn't come out, or frustration comes out when it shouldn't come out. And that's because we're not comfortable where we're at in our space or our journey in life.
And Kelly, I teach emotional science, and so I like to break down emotional science, and you hit it round the head. A lot of people don't know where they're at, and I've said this to other shows and many people, understanding who you are, what you are, and when you are at the present moment allows you to move forward. But understanding how your emotions are affecting your chemical and cellular biology and how it's locking you up into prison cell, that you cannot move forward. You're not living forward. You're trying to survive, and you're not living. But I want to get into what you're doing with these boys. Tell us about that.
So, two things. First, two companies. I have a nonprofit called the Urban Institute for Strengthening Families, and then I have a for-profit called the LeGrand Little Group, where the model and the whole logic behind it is embrace your truth. That's the logo. Mm-hmm. And so I take that logo, and for black and brown boys and for disenfranchised and exploited populations, I provide that same thing where they get executive coaching, where they get leadership coaching, and where they get life coaching in the model of embrace your truth. So truly teaching them how to find out who they are, what their purpose in life is, taking them through a rites of passage program, speak in African tradition so that they understand their lineage, their self-worth, their self-esteem, and self-confidence, which will help propel them to navigate any course that life gives them in a different perspective, because they understand the sacrifices that their ancestors made, but more importantly, by walking them through this rites of passage, they understand how to take this journey we call life, and then how to deal with the emotional challenges that's presented to them, and dealing with any adverse childhood experiences that may have came up in their life. And the great sister, Dr. DeGroot, also talked about the post-traumatic slave disorder and how that plays a factor in how we show up in life. So helping them understand that they have a support system through healing circles, and then exposing them to environments, conditions, and places that they otherwise would have never been exposed to, which now gives them a different lens to view life through, so that they know that they can accomplish anything that they put their mind to.
Building kings, man. You're building kings.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, let's educate some people. And you would think that many black, brown people will understand who they are and where they come from and where they could go. You would also understand that even in the white culture, even though there are systems in place, you would understand that they should know, at least these days, what has happened and why it has affected us. But believe it or not, people still don't flippin' know. So let's educate some people about, what do you mean by disenfranchised youth?
So if we look at the current society that we live in, which is a Western society, it's taught that 400 years ago, our people came to this country, which is, one, a myth, because we were here before that. But the other piece is when we look at the current state of opportunities and equity in this country, because most of us like to use the term equality, but equality would suggest that I give you something proportionally the same as I would give somebody else. But when we have not been afforded the same path or the same opportunity, my equality won't help me reach economic mobility.
Correct.
So disenfranchised populations are those populations who have been exploited and taken advantage of. So us as black people, we have not been given reparations. We have not been given the same employment opportunities that other folk have had in the past. We are essentially in a place where the playing field is not the same for us.
And I've read and heard this, and sometimes, and I actually believe it, that a black man's college education doesn't even match up to a white man's high school diploma.
Well, and I've read statistics that said the same thing. In fact, I've also read that if you had a master's degree and a white male has spent some time in prison, there is still a greater probability that he may get an opportunity before you would.
And I also read that. So tell me how. And I work with kids and young kids, and I see some of the despair in their eyes. But more importantly, I see despair in the parents' eyes. And we know there's a lot of families, a lot of black families that don't have males in that family because they're lost in their own slave mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
How can we talk to those parents to get them back on track so we can build this family and move forward?
Well, first and foremost, I think what adults have to first start doing is, let me back up a second.
Okay.
No child comes into this universe with a set of instructions.
Right.
And so, in our culture, and this is back in the days of, the 1800s, what we used to do was speak life into our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to go back to allowing our children to show us how we need to be treated, because each of our children came with a specific skill and skill set. And so when we listen to our children as opposed to allowing our own trauma and worldly challenges to impact how we communicate and how we help them to navigate, then we come back to our true essence. So some of the things that we can do to help them is, again, listen. Being attentive and situationally aware will allow us to be able to pay attention to where the opportunities for our young people are. They are truly brilliant, and part of the thing as adults, because we want what's best for our kids, sometimes we don't want to see them fail. And so we enable them. But failure is a part of growth. Without failure, and I'll quote the great Frederick Douglass, there can be no progress without a struggle.
There it is.
Failure is the saving grace that gives us the foundation to propel and catapult into the universe, into the stratosphere, so that we can accomplish the great things that we were placed on this earth to do.
I had a conversation with Dr. Cornel West, and he says maybe we should stop looking at ourselves as being what we say is failed, but what we can do as growth. So, yeah, I know that was part of that Frederick Douglass theory in how he said what he said, because it is part of where we can go, not so much how much we've fallen down.
Yeah.
The trauma you mentioned, how do you normally speak to a young boy? And I hope when you listen to Bridges Live, people, thank you for all the people who are listening to Bridges Live. We're talking about talking to our young African, black, brown boys and let them know that they can rule the kingdom. They just got to first know who they are. And in this visit here, in this conversation here, we are not pulling punches. We are not holding back. This is about education. And I think when people hear us talk positively about African Americans and about Black pride, so many people get taken back from it, Mr. Kelly, and say, well, what about unity? So how do you answer that when we talk about unity? Just because we're talking about unity as far as a culture, we're not talking about separation in your culture.
Exactly. So in order for us to be able to in order for us to get to where we need to be, there are certain inherent things that we have to work out with ourselves.
Right.
So unity has to start with me unifying my physical body and aligning it with my spiritual body and reconnecting to my essence and my source, which is that culture that has been taken away from me. So this has nothing to do with other ethnicities. It has everything to do with us restoring our own mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health first, so that we can come to the table complete and whole, and then that way we can give to the rest of society.
Now, you mentioned reparations, and I have a thing about reparations, and this has a lot to do because we're so economically dumb. The black people are economically dumb. They wouldn't know what to do with the money they would get except buying those silly things that are materialistic. So we need to advance their economic mentalness before we can actually get reparations. And I think God knows that. I think this will not ever happen until we as a people come together as a people to understand what we are economically as a people. Then we would have our own reparations.
So I agree that there's some intense work that has to be done in our community. And again, it's a holistic approach.
Yes.
And finances is at the core, because when we understand economics, money, and the importance of ensuring that our dollars are spent in our communities, so that we have neighborhoods, so that we have communities. And we know that it's possible because when we look at the Great Depression, we also must remember that we had a thriving economic institution in Tulsa, Oklahoma,
That's right,
Durham, North Carolina, and Wilmington, North Carolina, and all throughout the country that had to be deconstructed through bombing it and through other social movements, because they were thriving at a time when other industries would not thrive.
That's right.
And so we have the mental capacity, we have the intelligence. It's just us reconnecting with that mental intelligence and really debunking a lot of these myths and untruths that's been set up in our society to distract us from operating in our true greatness.
Do you find it difficult to get the people out to be educated? Because it's not like you can go to their homes, so they got to come to you. What's some of those ways you get them to come listen to this information?
Well, first I start out with the young people because I decided to get into the school and pass on information. And as I started working with these young kids and listening to their voice, because what happens often, and I did many years in senior leadership in government, what I found is that a lot of times when we get to certain places, we talk about data, we talk about best practice, which is definitely a part of the equation, but it's not the complete picture. And so when we start talking about first social return on investment and how we capture the voice of the customer, in this case, those black and brown people, allowing them to have a part of the conversation, then I see that they're more willing to be involved. And the more we sit and we explain things in layman terms, because sometimes people like to talk above different people's heads. And so that automatically turns those individuals off. But when we're starting to align ourselves in sharing how this would benefit them, I found that people would be more prone to be involved. And then when we're having conversation around how I help you to get better jobs so that you can not only survive but thrive in a society, capitalist society, that only wants you to survive, then now they're even more focused on how do I come and grab this information because it can change the trajectory of my life.
Do you think it would benefit the black and brown community to build their own schools?
I think it can benefit to some degree, but at the same time, the unfortunate thing is, or not even unfortunate, what happens then is we still have to live in an integrated society.
Correct.
So I don't know how beneficial that would be. I think for an initial period it would be helpful because it'll give you an opportunity to have a greater understanding of self first. And when you have that greater understanding of self and self-worth, then you're in a position to be able to integrate and interact with other folks from a different perspective and understand that you bring great value to the table just like they do.
Now, in the area you live in, the schools that you come across and the schools you work with, in the elementary schools, do you see a lot of men in those schools, and do you see a lot of black men in those schools?
No, and no. You see a very small number of men, and I think across the country, if I'm mistaken, it's about 2% males who are in the education field from the black community.
Now, I have talked to some black males who tried to get into the elementary and the lower level schools and the middle schools and the elementary schools, and they're not getting hired. What do you think is going on there?
So I think sometimes people know that this could help, and if we're honest, we live in an era where we talk about the school to prison pipeline and how the school to prison pipeline is really supported by other networks. And so that could be part of the equation. But ultimately, I think on many occasions, on some of those schools, some people are uncomfortable with black males, if we're completely honest. And so because of their unfamiliarity or because of a sense of fear, that may prohibit them from hiring those black males. And one thing I will give that in my area, I do see black males being hired.
I do see the prison pipeline in some of these schools. I do see these kids are not being educated, they're being trained. And there's a difference.
Yes. And you touched on something, Doc, because if I'm completely honest, which I love to be, we have to start looking at even challenging our current educational system, because what we do is we digest and regurgitate information as opposed to actually truly challenging ideals and methodologies that have been a long-standing practice in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so true education is being comfortable with people challenging the information and using scientific inquiry to position us to be able to develop critical thinkers.
But they're not developing critical thinkers in the school system, and it's hurting our boys. It's hurting our young women. It's actually hurting our communities to actually learn to associate with each other. They're keeping us separate because they're not developing critical thinking in the schools. They're not allowing critical thinking in the schools, and this Common Core and the different type of curriculums are here to pacify these people just so they can listen to commands and not educate them in the brain.
Right. And if you look at the ringing of the bell, when you look at the transition and movement,
yep.
This is really subconsciously preparing people to be moved and shepherded through processes that greatly resemble a prison system.
Hey, brother, preach, because most people look at it and I'm like, a school, people say, well, what about, organizations? What about, what's the word they try to use, to keep people in line? Order. I said, there's a difference between order and ritualistic demands. Bell ringing, quiet through transitioning. All this is prison system vernacular.
Right. And then we look at prison systems as if they were state institutions, when in reality, they're private institutions.
Yes.
And so they're exploiting our young people, they're exploiting our adults, and it's impacting and affecting most populations. So some people think, although it's damaging the Black Latino population the most, but it's impacting the poor people as well. And we have to understand that until we address a system or institution with the strongest system or institution, and that system or institution could be the institution of education as well as other things. But I don't mean education in the sense of school education. We have to learn to understand how to self-educate ourselves as well.
So I want to let people know we're talking to Mr. Kelly R. Little, and this is Dr. Paul and William Bridges Live. And if you listen to some of the show, you would think that we're complaining. No, and I don't want people to listen to this to say, you guys just sound like you're bashing the system. No, and like I said before when this all started, this is about information, this is about understanding, and then it's about putting this into action. If you don't understand what people are living within their lives and what the direction they're coming from, I don't know how we can pull together to go forth. So this is what we were talking about, Mr. Kelly and I are talking about. We're talking about what lives are, right? We're talking about what lives have been through. We're talking about the systematic situation that is going on. Now from there is a solution. Mr. Kelly, let's talk about some of those solutions.
So, one, I think we have to get back to creating apprenticeship and school systems. Because the only thing that's recession-proof is the trade.
Yes.
So education is important, but education and having a skill or a trade will allow us to be able to grow from a financial perspective in times of economic disarray. In addition to that, we have to understand that unification is what will bring us to the places that we need to be. So, I'm saying when we have young people, we also need to take those elders, which we forgot.
Mm-hmm.
Those counselor elders will help give us the vision. They will help give us the strategy. But more importantly, they keep us grounded by moving in the spirit of culture.
Yes.
Because culture is what eats strategy for breakfast on any given day. When we bring that culture to the table, now we're able to not be impacted by historical challenges that we face, because the intellectual property and the elders will give us the collective wisdom and knowledge to be able to navigate those challenges and barriers.
Now, can we call out the men and tell? Let's talk straightly to the black male. Let's tell them what you want them to know and hear.
Well, first and foremost, I want them to know and hear that they are the foundation to the black community.
Yes.
They are the pillars that hold the house in order. We need you back. I understand through certain systemic and institutional practices, you have been essentially erased from homes, but we're calling you back home because these boys need you. Many times, but the majority of the young people that I work with, the reason why they're involved in criminal activity or making bad choices and decisions is simply tied to the fact that they didn't have that male presence in the home.
Yep.
And when it was in the home, it wasn't consistent. So, We need you.
Now, I know some of these black men are afraid. And I know some of these are living in fear because they say every time I step out of the house, I don't know if I'll come back between one type of violence through another type of act by another entity. And I'm not even going to mention the names of who's killing black men and black boys because it comes from so many different sides. But we have to get out of our way and get out of fear and start learning how to live.
Yes. And I think you said something really important. So, what I was always told, on the other side of fear is just success.
Yes.
On the other side of fear is ascension. On the other side of fear is everything that you dreamed of. Therefore, we must feel the fear and do it anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly R. Little. Tell us how we can get a hold of you and support you down in your neck of the woods.
Okay, my website is www.urbaninstitute4strengtheningfamilies.com. They can contact me on my immediate phone number at 704-658-5520. I need you all to support me on my podcast, which is The Infinite Voice of Our Youth. And yes, that's every means of communication that I have. And I'm looking forward to hearing from your listeners, supporting your show, as well as anybody who needs assistance with helping young people navigate difficult systems and institutions like social services, like child support, like the educational system. I'm here for you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to let people know you listen to Dr. Paul and Bridges Live. We're talking to Mr. Kelly R. Little. And remember, I'll be posting this again. Catch us on iHeart and iTunes Radio. And you can catch it on my social media websites and YouTube channels. God bless and God forgive us all for our sins and let us keep moving forward so we can build ourselves not as a nation of one, but a nation of many. Thank you, Mr. Little.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Doc.